listen throughout the world. It's football time in Tennessee.
Yo, what is up, everyone? Brando and Drew here back on another Wednesday, bringing you another edition of the Vols ATB podcast. 7 o'clock sharp Central, 8 Eastern time. Glad to be back this week. Drew, my guy, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I can't complain one bit. Work has been a total bitch this week, but, you know, we're halfway through. We're almost done with the week. And 38 days, man. 38 days until it's football time in Tennessee and Nashville. It's coming. I'm fired up right now.
Yeah, fired up is an understatement. A lot to look forward to as it comes to football. A lot of our former guys making noise in the NFL and the training camps. 38 days, like you said, would not be right unless I went on YouTube and watched the old highlights against Florida. 38 points in Knoxville, where Tennessee knocked off Florida a few years back in the Lyle administration. Cannot wait until football gets here. Life has been throwing all the angles, all the pitches, all the fastballs coming at. Here, sipping on tea and not, out of a Tito's bottle, which says a lot about me on the Vols ATB show. But like you said, man, counting down the days, 38 days until college football, especially for the good shade of orange. And, just really looking forward to it. We are going to be joined by Matt Ray, football recruiting insider from VolQuest at On3 here shortly, about 8:05. Cannot wait to, sit down with him, talk some Tennessee football recruiting, and, just kind of get a look at the board as, Tennessee is looking to add another back-to-back top 10 class under Josh Heupel. Drew, obviously the news that we're going to talk about is the fact that Kai Bates, 4-star DB, chose LSU today. Really does sting when you lead for a guy all the way up. But like Rob said in the chat, a recruit really isn't yours until signing day. That one does sting. But, me personally, I'm not looking too bad on it. Tennessee has recruited and has commits from 5 4-star DBs the last 2 years. Me personally, I thought this one would have been an extra present to the DB room, but I'm not, calling it a super, super bad loss or anything.
I'm not too worried about it. Like you just mentioned, it is July. I mean, we still have, over 4 months until the first, day of signing day appears. There's still plenty of time for Tennessee to make ground, in his recruitment and be able to get, a couple solid DBs for this class. But, I would probably be panicking a little bit more if we missed out on Bates and Edwin Spillman. But, getting 1 out of 2, you can't expect to get every single top target that you have. So being 1 out of 2 for the most part, it's hard to complain.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of Vols looking for the future, but, got to, give a shout out to our Vols that are making their way known in the NFL. A couple good quotes today, highlights, obviously the Jalen Hyatt touchdown in the Giants practice, the physicality and the conditioning of Darnell Wright in Chicago. Cedric Tillman looks to be fitting in well in Cleveland. A lot of guys getting their feet wet in the big leagues. Really excited for them to see that. Obviously, they have crazy impacts, but it just goes to show back to recruiting what this staff can do with players that they were gifted, and I can't wait to kind of see them get down into it. 38 days. I guess at this time, we're going to bring in our guest, Matthew Ray from On3 VolQuest. Matt, how are you doing, my man?
What's up, guys? How are you?
Doing great, man. Just, like Drew said, counting down the days, 38 days until football. Know you're going to have your hands wet, busy. Doesn't get any better until we count down now.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is definitely the most exciting time of the year, I think, when you look at it, once the kind of pads go on for the high school season, it starts to snowball downhill, and that's where we're at right now. Teams getting ready for scrimmages, first high school game starting in less than a month now, and then you're right on the doorstep of college football starting back.
Oh, yeah, man. One I have circled on my list to go watch is going to be that IMG versus Lipscomb game on the 19th of August. Cannot wait to go see that. But I know that, you out there in Knoxville having your hands full. The boys start practice. They report August 1st, probably have fall camp August 2nd. What are you kind of looking for most? I know you're probably hyped up.
Yeah, I think this year, for Tennessee is you're going into year 3 under Josh Heupel. You look at a lot of different things, From a storyline standpoint, I'm very interested to see, what shakes out at the offensive tackle position. What's that rotation look like? Who locks in a spot there? You're obviously going to have to replace Jerome Carbon at guard. What does that look like? So there's some questions on the offensive line. And then I think any time that you have some continuity in a program, it's always interesting to see guys that that take that step from year one to year two. So what does a James Pierce look like? What does a Josh Josephs look like? What's the competition like in the secondary? I mean, there's going to be plenty to talk about at Tennessee this fall.
Oh, yeah. I mean, coming off the last two classes under Josh Heupel, it was cool to see guys like Spraggins and Cooper Mays having their names in the All-American list. A lot of questions around Tennessee's offensive line. Just really getting a feel for what this team can be. A lot of new names, a lot of guys that had to step up, and I think the fans are going to have a lot of fan favorites. I guess we can go ahead and dive into recruiting. Tennessee currently sitting top 10 in its class. Cannot stress enough how important the last 2 years have been for recruiting for Tennessee. What has been your biggest takeaway from the 2024 class so far?
Yeah, I think with the 2024 class so far for Tennessee, you have hit on a lot of your top guys early on. Now, obviously, you've lost some battles for some big name targets that have come down to the wire. I mean, let's go to Kyle Bates just earlier in the evening. Back and forth. He commits to LSU, but for the most part, I think for Tennessee, they're building on the success that they sustained last fall with an Orange Bowl victory. You're not going to win every big recruiting battle. It's just the way it goes. Our kind of phrase for the last few months has been win your fair share, and Tennessee still has a chance to do that with the guys left on the board. Now that Kai's off the board to LSU, all eyes will turn to Amari Jefferson, who will decide on August 5th, and that's another one of those deals where it's back and forth. He's going to take another look at Alabama. He's going to take another look at Tennessee, and then he'll decide. So, there's still some wiggle room there, in my opinion, for him. But that's where attention turns now. But as far as the 2024 class overall, I think there's probably some expectations out there that from the fan base that Tennessee's going to sign a top 5 class. I think that's tough to do sometimes. It's when you look at it from an overall standpoint, there's just so much that you can't control. Recruiting rankings being one. Now with the 25 number being out of the question, where you're only playing with an 85 scholarship number, there are programs that are going to sign 27, 28, 29 guys. And their recruiting rankings are going to be boosted because of that. They're going to rank higher than a school that signs 22, 23, 24 guys and addresses the other needs in the portal. That's going to be something that I think is unique moving forward. But for Tennessee, I just kind of look at the class pound for pound. Overall, when you look at, Florida's maybe second or third in the country right now. And they have some good pieces in the class. To me, I would take Tennessee's class today. When you look at who Tennessee's beat out for some of these guys, I would take Tennessee's class today, and that's kind of where I'm at with it. I think it's been a really good class for Tennessee. Put the rankings out of the picture. There's still work to do, but yeah, I think overall, off to a good start in 2024, and we'll see what comes in the fall.
Yeah, and obviously the overall reaction, like you said, a lot of fans coming off, 11-win season, 10-win season, Orange Bowl victory. They want that top 5 class, but like you said, when you compare this class to a lot of other teams' class, addressing the needs that Tennessee has, they've been able to, get it done so far at the offensive line. They're still looking to add a piece there. The big, huge wins, obviously getting Edwin Spillman locked in, Mike Matthews last week, and then overall looking at the in-state recruiting, you still got Boo Carter and Marcus Gore. In my opinion, that's a success to me. Obviously, the overreaction whenever you have something that does not go your way. But I think it's obvious that when you look at it on paper, like you said, that Tennessee's trending in the right direction. And like you said, a lot of names upcoming, Amari Jefferson, visiting Tennessee, and then Bama right after, Bennett Warren. Where do you see kind of Tennessee's board kind of looking now? How many guys are probably left on that before they try to get involved, like you said, in the new day and age of recruiting, dipping into the transfer portal or reevaluating their board towards December?
I think it's interesting. You still got names out there that aren't going to decide until later in the fall that can really, change if they were committed or to commit right now, they change the way the recruiting rankings are. Obviously, you got Jordan Ross, the top 50 edge out of Vestavia Hills. that Tennessee's deep in it for and has been for a while. You've got Daniel Okoye, who Tennessee's been deep in it with for a while, and has continued to sit in a good spot there since his last unofficial up here in June. Ryan Wingo's not going to decide until later in the winter. Camarion Franklin's still hanging out there. I mean, that one, is a guessing game by the day right now because he's not really sure and settled on where he wants to go. But Tennessee's still in that. I think when you look at the visits, he has visited Miami some. He's visited Auburn some. They're definitely in the picture. He's been to Tennessee a lot. He's been to Tennessee more than both of those schools. So just because he hasn't been back here in the last month, since his official visit, he was here. I think just because he took those late visits at the end of June, people tend to forget that he was here in the middle of June, So for me, I think Tennessee's still very much in the picture there. We'll see where that one goes. But there's still names left out there going into the fall. They're going to evaluate Nazir Smith at Grayson. They're going to continue to evaluate guys like Denaz White from Robinson up in North Carolina. But really, I think as far as the board expanding, the key thing about this Tennessee staff is they're not going to, go against their evaluations. They're going to trust their evaluations and they're going to go with it. And I think that's very important. So they'll, once high school film starts to circulate, mid to late September, you'll start seeing new names pop up across the country and you'll see Tennessee involved with new names.
Yeah. And then, like you said, I think everyone can agree, when Heupel first got here, it was, having to rebuild. But now you look at these battles, you're in heavyweight battles with the top teams in the country when it comes to recruiting. I mean, when you lose to a team like LSU, who's known as DBU, or just, others in general, I know it's easy to, kind of get upset. But to go out there and be battling heavyweights for these kinds of classes, being a, top 12, 15 class versus being a top 10, it may not seem that different, wanting to be in a top 5 class, but it very much is. And, just evaluating everything else. I know one of the big visitors everyone wants to know before we talk into the predictions in the season, Mr. Ryan Wingo that you mentioned, got back on campus today, if I'm correct. How do you see that one going? A lot of people, say it's going to expand out into December, but you never know in this day and age of recruiting or what a kid decides to do.
Yeah. So Ryan was supposed to be on campus today. Didn't make it in. Won't make it in until later tonight. We'll be on campus tomorrow for the visit. But, at the end of the day, that you're playing the long game there. And I think everybody's kind of known that. Ryan has a lot of suitors. The rule change with allowing recruits to take unlimited unofficial visits, I think that, shifts some things up. He'll take an official visit here in the fall, and Tennessee will be there in the mix until the end. We've seen different leaders throughout that recruitment. We've seen, at one point, it felt like Georgia maybe had some momentum. You quietly hear talk of Michigan. Texas has some momentum. I think Missouri's in it more than some may give them credit for. We'll see where it only ends up at this fall. Ryan Wingo took a ton of visits last fall. He took a visit almost every weekend, it seemed like. So he'll be back to Tennessee again after this visit. We'll see where he's at coming out of this visit. But, that one, he has a decision date set for, at some point during the early signing period, December 20th, I think, something like that. But for him, it's just going to be trying to win out down the stretch. There's going to be, twists and turns with that one. He's very highly engaged in the process. He asks a lot of questions. He's trying to fill out each school and find what's best for him. But the one thing he always comes back to with Tennessee is the fact that their offense seems tailor-made for him. So that's going to keep Tennessee in it until the end, and he has a strong relationship with Kelsey Pope.
Yeah, and another guy that, is in that same boat that has a visit set up, Daniel Okoye, the edge rusher you mentioned, a guy that has his visit set for, I believe, the South Carolina game. How important is that rule for these kind of guys that have been to Tennessee a few times, but Tennessee's playing the long game, correctly to get that official visit that one they're allowed later when the guys were really close to counting down?
Yeah, I think if a guy's not going to decide, the closer you can get that official visit to that decision timeline, the better, because you have a multi-day. They're here for multiple days, so you have a chance to really make an impression on them during that visit. It allows them to acclimate themselves to campus. They're around the staff. They see more of the day-to-day type stuff going on. So Daniel Koye, he'll be here that weekend. He'll get a feel for what a game day's like here. I think that's important to him. He's obviously very highly interested in Tennessee.
Oh, yeah.
He flew out here the last time. He drove cross country in January to come get his first look at it, and that solidified Tennessee as a player. He's taking some other visits right now to end out the month here. He was at Alabama yesterday. He'll take another visit to end the month. So, we'll see what comes with Daniel Koye, but Tennessee's done a really, really good job there. Mike Eckler has been highly involved with the Midwest standout for a while, and they have hit it off very well.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen all the mentions on Twitter, recruits like Boo Carter, Jesse Perry, a lot of those guys being heavily involved, wanting him to be a big name. A lot of guys, like you said, as this board keeps on expanding, another name that was, two other names were kind of mentioned, Aiden Breland, Brandon Baker, expected to maybe kind of get involved, wait and see approach with them. Where do you think the margin is with those two guys? Is Tennessee going to try to swing here or try to at least get involved to get a foot in the door?
Tennessee's tried to be involved there with both of those guys. They were out here, Breland was here for 865 Live. Baker was here earlier in the spring. It's hard to get those guys cross country. There was some hope that Breland would be out here this weekend. It doesn't look like that's going to happen as of right now. We'll see. At one point, it looked like Breland was going to make a decision by the end of June, shortly after official visits. It's the end of July almost, and he still hasn't made a decision. So what does this thing look like once he gets into the fall? Maybe you have a chance you can get him back for an official visit, later on. But, realistically, both of those modern-day kids seem like long shots for a while, and that's kind of where it still feels like it's at.
Yeah, I'm going to let Drew get here involved as well, but, getting these guys to extend into the season as well, especially for games like South Carolina, giving them a chance to see the environments of Neyland Stadium that a lot of kids in the 2023 class were able to get in here for the Bama game, the Florida game, and just being able to see that home environment. Obviously, we as fans know how much of a factor Neyland Stadium is, but how much does it really come down when these guys do get on campus and they see that in-game action after they've built these kind of relationships with the coaching staff and try to narrow down their decision?
Yeah, I think it's important. I think you look back to some of the late success last fall. I think it really paid dividends for Tennessee. Anytime, and you hear Heupel say this a lot, but anytime you can showcase your brand of football, you want to do that. And Tennessee did that last fall, and in front of a sold-out Neyland Stadium, Alabama. You take them down, you storm the field, and that recruiting weekend was absolutely massive. You had a who's who list of the guys you wanted in 23 there. You had guys that you wanted, here in 24. Mike Matthews was there that night. And if you would have told me at that point in October of last fall that Tennessee would have had a shot at Mike Matthews, I would have probably laughed. Just to be honest with you. But that night made an impression on him. He saw that offense. He saw them do it against Alabama. And then, at the end of the day, he wanted to come back in January and learn more about it. Now, obviously, the environment is important. It's fun to be somewhere and have a good time, see fans having a good time, see fans recognizing you. But the product that you put on the football field is just as important. If the place is rocking and then it's dead silent, midway through the third quarter, you lose a little bit of that. So if you don't go out there and perform, it definitely hurts you. And Tennessee was able to do that multiple times last fall.
For sure. Drew?
Yeah, Matt, once again, just want to appreciate you coming on here and joining us for a little.
Yeah, absolutely.
I did want to ask you just a quick question. Kai Bates obviously heading to LSU, and this month for recruiting has been really just up and down in general. With Braylon Russell, where we really thought he was going to come here, wound up coming to Arkansas as well. And as good as I do, like when it comes to the message boards, people freak out a little bit when we don't get these recruits. With Amari Jefferson committing next week, if we somehow Tennessee misses out on that one as well, do you think the fan base has a right to maybe be a little bit hesitant or panic a little bit as far as having a top 10 recruiting class, or do you think it's just one of those things that just goes along and it's just the game of recruiting?
I mean, I'll always attribute a pretty good bit of it to a game of recruiting. I understand, I mean, I get the pieces of it and understand where the concern is. You want to land recruits that the Alabamas want, the Georgias want. Like that's part of taking the next step. So I get that, 100%. But I mean, I think when you look at some of these things, like with Kai, with Braylon, for Tennessee, those both came down to the wire, and from my side, it never felt like Tennessee did anything wrong in those recruitments to lose out. Like, I felt like they had the kid at certain points. They, with Braylon, most definitely, it felt like Tennessee had a lot of momentum there at one point, but then the pull to stay home become very real. With Kai, it felt like his best relationships were here at Tennessee, but, he's from Alabama originally. There were some, there was some LSU pull there around him, so that factored in as well. I mean, there's just so many variables that go into these different types of things that it just makes it interesting in a lot of ways. But yeah, I mean, I understand, where there's some hesitancy at, especially coming off the season, that Tennessee had. But I don't think there's any cause for panic just yet.
And like you said, Matt, I feel like, Russell and, Bates as well, it's kind of like adding spice to the pot. Tennessee at those positions, it's not like they're losing out at those positions right now. They have Peyton Lewis committed, obviously, a very speedy guy. They do want a bigger back. Sounds like we will be trying to look for that in the portal. And then, Bates at DB, he would have been adding to the pudding as well, having Marcus Gore, Boo Carter, Caleb Beasley, being able to lock down the state as much as you have. Obviously, all eyes turn on to, Bennett Warren and Amari Jefferson. I think, people morally being an in-state recruit when it comes down to Tennessee and Bama, they want to have that feel that they had last year when Arian Carter was kind of going down to the wire. Obviously, it always doesn't go in your favor, but very, very much to look forward to coming into this visit. Bama does get the last visit, but I think we've talked about it before that, Tennessee has a shot to hit a home run here. Just because it's the final visit does not mean it's all for Bama. Amari Jefferson is a very different kind of recruit, that the last visit kind of thing. He's going to take in everything at Tennessee before heading to that barbecue at Alabama. What does Tennessee really need to do to hit a home run coming up for this visit?
Yeah, so I asked Amari that this week already. I asked kind of, what's the focus here? And it's to him, he's going to ask questions. That's the type of kid that he is. He processes a lot of information. He's going to get back up, and he's going to be around. He wants to be around each staff one more time, ask the final questions that he has, and just see where the gut feeling is. He's kind of in a feel right now where he doesn't feel like he can make a wrong decision at this point, but baseball's factoring in, and, to me, some of that works in Tennessee's favor. From the football side of things, Alabama's, shown him some really good player comparisons, things that make a lot of sense to him. He really likes some of those things. So I think it's interesting for him, going into this, final, end game, if you will, of the recruitment, in terms of what he's going to do. I think he's just going to try to truly go sit down and see where that feels right. Now, right now going into these visits, I would lean Alabama for Amari Jefferson. But at the end of the day, a few people ask, where do you feel like, if Alabama's getting the last visit, that must mean it's a done deal. I don't feel that way because Alabama's getting the last visit. If he was only visiting Alabama, then yeah, it's probably a done deal. He's visiting both. He wants to see both one more time. He's not just trying to drag Tennessee to the finish line here. He wants to see both. He wants to do his due diligence. For me, I think one thing that may work in Tennessee's favor is they may get the more personal visit. If they end up winning this thing down the stretch, I think it will be because maybe they got the more personal visit on Friday where there's not as many people around as there are at that barbecue on Saturday. I think that's going to be important. So we'll see. We'll see what comes out of that. But, there's work to be done for Amari Jefferson right now for Tennessee. But, going back to kind of some of the questions that I've fielded here, I think a lot of times it's easy to focus on the ones you don't get or the ones that seem to get away from you late. But when you look at the ones that this staff has won late, I mean, again, I think they've won their fair share dating back over the last two seasons. I mean, Ricky Gibson, 7 days out last year, was Georgia bound. Anybody you talk to, he was headed to Georgia. Going into Jordan Matthews, Tennessee was barely viewed as a dark horse by some on the outside looking in there. Arion Carter, days out. That one was trending Alabama. Tennessee's able to make up the ground and win that one. David Hobbs, same deal. So I mean, I think overall, it's just been, and maybe it's been one of those deals where there's not as many cut and dry this time around. And I guess it just gets to maybe there hasn't been, kids picking between just a handful of schools and you don't know which way it goes. Like, I guess that makes it easier. Like a few years back when Eric Gilbert went on stage in Atlanta and there were 5 teams up there and he could have picked all 5 and nobody had a clue where he was going, and LSU was probably the least likely and he picked LSU. But, this time around it's been more head-to-head battles, and I think when those types of recruiting battles happen, if you sit down and look at it, from a fan perspective, you can see ways that you should win that, right? Your team shouldn't lose if you're a fan realistically in those situations. And that's kind of, I think a little bit of, the cause for concern maybe so much this time around.
Yeah, and I mean, props to Bama. They've done a hell of a job recruiting Amari, especially not just, on the field, but personally as well. And like you said, that's going to be a huge, huge factor for him. Having the season that Kelsey Pope had, how he's recruited so far in this class, locking down his in-state friends. When Amari Jefferson comes on campus, on top of, obviously the staff with his relationship and the staff and everything, the relationship with, the commits and the guys in-state that have been in his ear, Boo Carter, Edwin Spillman, a lot of those guys weren't committed when they were, Amari was just getting started on this, board and recruitment to Tennessee. How big of a factor is that going to play as well with the staff of having his friends in his ear, wanting to stay home, lock down the state, and be able to build something great at Tennessee?
Yeah, I think it certainly helps. I don't think you can ever discount those types of things. I think for a guy like Amari Jefferson, he wants to ask a lot of questions. He wants to hear a lot of different things. And I think from hearing from his peers and why they're interested in going to Tennessee and being a part of what they're trying to build there, plays a role. I don't think it's the end all be all, but I definitely think it's a factor.
So, but yeah, I mean, obviously a long time to December, but even more December going to May. The new day and age of college football is now December. Most kids trying to get that locked up in their high school senior season. I feel like we've covered and said already so far on the show, Tennessee really isn't like a can't close problem. It's just the day and age of committing and competing with, heavyweights in the college football world and trying to, when you want a top 5, top 10 class, you're going against guys that are, very much valuing these recruits as much as you do. And yeah, losing Russell sucks and, it didn't go our way today with Kai Bates, but the new day and age of where Tennessee can go and dip into that portal or can go to the JUCO rankings or find a guy that does blow up on his senior season, it gives like a lot of positive things. Going to December, we're in the end of July right now. We still have a few more months for Tennessee to find some guys that we don't even know about. 2 years ago, we didn't know about Tyree West. Last year, we never thought we were a factor for David Hobbs. Do you think the possibility for Tennessee to find those 1 to 2 guys late in the cycle to really add on to a class is probably still there and we just don't know it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when you evaluate tirelessly like this staff does, that opportunity's there, year in and year out. You have to, hope that somebody flashes or there's an opportunity there for somebody, obviously. But, I think one thing that this staff does is evaluate very well, and I think they'll continue to do that. And, they have a lot of, they have a pretty big recruiting footprint, in terms of places that they've been, people that they know, different connections. So there's not going to be many kids that turn up that Tennessee doesn't know about. And, you look back to maybe 2 years ago, there were kids that Tennessee was offering first and others followed. And it seemed like every time there for a little bit, there was like, oh, Tennessee offered this kid, now they're going to follow. Now this, staff's going to follow. And a guy that got away from Tennessee this cycle, pretty unexpectedly was Cam Fountain. But Tennessee discovered Cam Fountain 10 months before anybody else offered it. Yeah. So they're going to continue to evaluate guys.
Yeah. Obviously it's so much to factor in recruiting. We got the whole board that, they live and die by recruiting, but 38 days until kickoff in the season. Josh Heupel and Joe Milton, everyone, getting in Nashville, SEC media days, counting down the days. I think a lot of people, they look at this year and they're going to put it on, Joe Milton and what is Joe Milton going to do for the football team. But to my opinion, I think it really comes down to what we talked about is that offensive line. I want to get your opinion on what you think is really going to set the tone for Tennessee as they head into fall camp.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, from a leadership standpoint, there's going to be moments in fall camp where it's heated because you're pushing competition, and keeping everybody working towards the same common goal is always going to be important. And, understanding that if you don't win the battle in fall camp, that there's still going to be opportunity there for you. And I think that's something that this group of guys, and when you look at this culture, at Tennessee right now, I think that's something that they embrace a lot of. There's guys that, aren't in the same position group that work out and compete with each other. There are guys that are in the same position group that work out and compete with each other. They're around each other. Freshman class is very close. They came in and gone straight to work, this off season. They're pushing each other. And in doing that, they push the older guys. The older guys that are here know they need to make the most of their opportunity. They don't want a freshman taking, their spot. I mean, again, I think that positive culture is one of the main things that, Tennessee has working in its favor heading into year 3.
Yeah, and I'll let Drew hop back in here, but like you said, getting the young guys that you did with the top 10 class in 2023, you got guys, Jordan Matthews, Ricky Gibson, like you said, Arian Carter, a lot, especially on the defensive side of the ball, to really look forward to as they are with heavy hitter guys. The edge rushers, having a guy like Roman Harrison and Tyler Barron out there. The offensive line, having a veteran like John Campbell joining the team. I definitely think that leadership skill and the way they compete is going to play a big, big factor. And there's going to be some names that we probably aren't even talking about that are going to find a way onto this field. Like, last year in the Bama game, we had William Wright out there just because of how it was. Being able to see, true freshmen being able to get their feet wet, whether it's, for 4 games or more, just being able to see them compete is going to, give a lot of praise and benefit to guys that try to discuss this stats recruiting techniques.
Yeah, Matt, one last question before we let you go here. There's a lot of question marks. I feel like not within the fan base, but maybe more of national media in general when it comes to Joe Milton this year and what the expectations should be. What do you expect out of him this season? And do you think that he could be able to even reach the same amount of potential as far as performance-wise that we saw from Hendon Hooker a year ago?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think overall for Joe Milton, a lot of it comes down to his confidence. I don't feel like Joe played, as confident as he maybe will this fall when he got his first starts here at Tennessee. He's learning a new offense, so that in one, doesn't make you quite as confident. Even though you've got the reps in fall camp, you come in and you're still trying to go on the fly, and now the bullets are flying, and you have a really good pit team, that's going to come at you, and they're physical, so I mean, for me, I think a lot of it comes down to how confident Joe Milton plays. I think he's touched on that, at SEC Media Days. He has some of that confidence back. It's been a good summer for Joe. He got to go to the Manning Passing Academy, showed out down there. But I think, honestly, for Joe Milton, he has a chance to do whatever, he wants to do. There's just not many guys like Joe Milton in terms of size and sheer arm talent. Now, you have to help him. You have to be able to protect him. You have to keep him upright. As a quarterback, you can't do anything laying on your back. But, overall, I mean, Tennessee still has weapons on the offensive side of the football. You lose Jalen Hine, you lose Cedric Tillman, but, Dante Thornton provides so much intrigue. He can play. He's a true combo receiver that can play inside or out. He can run. He's long. He presents a different challenge, than anybody that I think Tennessee had on their roster last fall. Brew McCoy is back. When you think about Brew McCoy, I mean, you're talking about a guy that, last season was very productive for Tennessee, was very steady, made maybe the biggest catch of the year, or right there along with it with Ramel Keaton's catch against Florida. But that last catch against Alabama was so huge, you don't, have a chance to kick the go-ahead field goal if Brew doesn't come down with that in traffic. And he got tagged, but he was coming off not playing football he was shaking cobwebs loose. So he's had another full season, full off season. He's back, ready to work again. So I think that's big. What Squirrel White possesses. Oh, yeah. And then Ramel Keaton has just had another really good offseason. He's put in really good work. He's earned his role inside of this system. So there's weapons around Joe Milton. And then you talk about, McCalling Castles and Jacob Warren. If you can find some more production at the tight end spot, I mean, I don't know that you can, put a limit on what Joe Milton can do from a weapon standpoint, but you need to protect him. And, that's something that Tennessee will obviously address heavily in fall camp.
Yeah. And when everyone looks at Josh Heupel as an offensive head coach, they see, the every year top 10 offense. Joe Milton coming in getting the reins this year, but the talent around him, like you said, I think all the question marks are very correctly to be on the defensive side of the ball. But when it comes to, continuing that and having a top 10 offense, do you see this year under Joe Milton being able to have a top 10 offense? And how far do you think that takes Tennessee in this season with the competition in the SEC?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's pretty hard to bet against them not having one, right? I mean,
Yeah.
when they were able to do what they did, in year one, I mean, it's pretty hard to bet against Tennessee not having a highly productive offense. And if you do that, I think you have a chance to win all the games you should win, and be right there in the ones that folks aren't picking you for. And to me, that's probably we'll see how Texas A&M plays. There's a lot of potential out there, but that's a crapshoot in my opinion. Who knows what comes of their season? Again, there's a lot of potential there. That roster is loaded with talent, but it has to come together. But you probably only go into the season right now if you're Tennessee. Not the favorite. You're not the favorite against Alabama and Georgia probably right now, and we'll see where things go from there. I think for me, Alabama's got questions to answer at the quarterback position. That's going to determine how far they go this fall.
Yeah. And before we let you go, appreciate you for joining us today, Matt, taking time out of your day.
Yeah.
A lot of us, we look at the offense, we look at those guys that have blown up and what they're going to do this year. In your opinion, who's that one guy that's on this roster, probably flying under the radar that no one's even talking about, that's going to play a huge factor on this roster this year?
I don't know that they're not talking about him, but I would probably pick Macaulay Castles right now. I mean, he's going to play.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, he's going to play this fall. Tennessee's, has a lower, number in the tight end room as Jacob Warren, Macaulay Castles, and Ethan Davis, and they're all going to play at some point. And I think Macaulay Castles is going to play a role. He's had a good offseason. He's more acclimated, so we'll see where he's at. But I think he's probably one that's being a little overlooked right now. He's going to have a part in Tennessee's offense.
Obviously, Ethan Davis coming off rehab sounds like he's going to be ready to go. But Macaulay Castles, a guy that was at UC Davis that a lot of people didn't know, committed out of nowhere, kind of out of the portal, was a top 15, tied in on a lot of PFF boards heading into the draft, decides to come to Tennessee. Definitely going to be a name to watch. Matt, we appreciate you for your time. Where can our listeners go and find you at?
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. You can find all my work at volquest.com, over on 3. You can find me on social media at Matt_Ray_.
Right.
Thanks,
you,
guys.
Matt. We appreciate you, man.
Good, Matt. Thank you.
A lot of insight, Drew, from recruiting to the football season. Sounds like, Tennessee, as much as we put on the BVS glasses and the BaseVols syndrome and the NegaVols, there's a lot more positivity in the air. In my opinion, a lot of that came from recruiting for a lot of guys that, people are kind of already writing off, like we said, from the can't close comments and the misses. It sounds like, Tennessee even being in these heavyweight battles is really doing due diligence in itself.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, just consider where we were, 2, 3, 4 years ago, as far as like those recruiting battles go, and just being able to be in that conversation again is just huge. I mean, especially considering, 2 years ago, Heupel had to figure out a way to, replace 35 guys that entered the portal, or left the program as well. So, I mean, we're in a great spot. We really are. And, and we're still in that conversation with guys like Brian Wingo. And, like you mentioned about, I think Missouri is going to be really, really tough, just being that in-state school for him, which I think a lot of people are overlooking in the first place. But, being able to get that visit, near the end of the season around late November, which I believe is going to be for the Georgia game, is huge. I mean, that's going to be a game changer for us. And him not deciding until December where he's going to play, at least 3 years of college at, is great news for Tennessee too. But I think, he had a lot of good insight. My biggest takeaway that I got from that conversation that we had with him was the fact, we shouldn't be so hung up anytime we lose a recruiting battle. This is just the name of the game, and it's just the day of college football, And really the more big emphasis and focus, really not just for Josh Heupel in Tennessee, but really just for a lot of programs in general, is like, in that transfer portal and getting those JUCO guys where they can be able to make that impact immediately. And as opposed to a couple of exceptions of, some freshmen, of course. But I think we're all right. He's got me pretty fired up about, talking about Joe Milton's potential, and especially Dante Thornton, man. That little comment he made about saying, like, he brought in, has more skill and talent than even anyone in that team last fall. Whew, that's got me amped.
A guy that was, a lot of competition there early on at Oregon, but the plays that he did make against teams like Washington and the highlights that he did have, that's a guy that definitely has the speed. Seeing him inside and out. And he said that, people have been talking about him, but McCallum Castles, man, that's definitely a sleeper pick. Was kind of surprised to hear that come out. A guy that's, I don't know if you've seen him, Drew. That guy is a weight room freak. He has transformed his body insanely, and he definitely could have went to the NFL last year and been NFL ready to go this year. Having that guy in your tight end room now, can't say measures about how much of a role he's going to play after losing a guy like Princeton Fant.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, it's one of those things I was thinking about when he mentioned that. Like Princeton Fant made such a huge impact, and I think like one of the most underrated players that we had in that entire offense last year. Not just being able to make plays, with his hands, but of course, like even playing as that fullback role a little bit, in those goal line situations, and having 2 or 3 tight ends, whether if it's Jacob Warren, Colin Castles or Ethan Davis as well, having multiple options at that tight end position, and guys they're all great athletes, big dudes as well. Like that's going to be huge for us coming in the fall, especially when we start. When injuries and plague and things like that, do occur, like being able to have 2 or 3 guys that are really going to be day one starters or could be, it's huge.
Yeah, man, really fired up. 38 days away. Cannot stress enough. I'm not going to be happy to be up and in Nissan Stadium at 11 a.m., but I'm going to be fired up. Cannot wait to get our feet wet, playing a team like Virginia. And I feel like this year, last year, the last 2 years, you've gotten your first 2 games out of the way, but then you have to go play a really, really tough Pitt team. Last year went in our favor in overtime. The year before that, obviously, we know how that went. But week 2, you go back home, and you have a team like Austin Peay. Week 3, you get ready for a team like Florida. I think it plays really well into Tennessee's, in their favor, just because of who they're playing, when they're playing them. Being able to see this team get some chemistry going, get some confidence with the new guys. We cannot forget that this team is the youngest team that we've had in I don't know how long. Losing as many guys as we did, everything getting wrapped up from the investigation, losing the scholarships, Tennessee having to work their way around that. I mean, this roster is sitting as pretty as it can be, and a lot of breakout guys that definitely looking excited for.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of young guys on this roster, some inexperience for sure. But the big difference, I would say, about this team than as opposed with previous regimes, of having a really, freshman, sophomore heavy, lifted roster is the fact that this team actually has depth around, those key positions like linebacker, Varian Carter, and you're talking about, even at wideout with going, with Caleb Webb, Squirrel White, just to name a couple guys too. And a running back too, especially with Cam Seldon, and a couple other, and Dylan Sampson too. So I think that's the huge difference, and that's going to play a massive role for us because, there's going to be a lot of guys this season that are going to have opportunities that are going to play. But the difference is that these are guys that are like ready to play in the SEC too, though, which was not the case for the last 15 years.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm really fired up. I'm excited. I think this team has the potential to go, and we'll talk about even a few weeks from now when we do our full season prediction. I think this team has the potential to go 11-1 this year. I really do. Like the talent is there. It's just how does the offensive line respond, replacing guys like Jerome Carvin, Darnell Wright, just key vital parts of that whole entire identity last year. How does Joe Milton respond and having that pressure as a 5th-year senior, finally getting that opportunity where he is the guy, going into game 1. And what can he do? And what potential could he fully reach? So there's a lot of questions for sure. But, hell, dude, it's, it's hard not to get excited about it. And it helps, too, that, like, we're playing a team like Virginia. And, like, no disrespect to Virginia, of course, but they're trash. They're a terrible.
Lost their starting quarterback. Obviously coming off a lot as a program in general. Tony Elliott's still trying to figure it out. And not just, for our rosters and the guys we got now, but especially the freshmen incoming. A lot of question marks on defense. In my opinion, it really cannot get worse, and just in my opinion. But being able to have those guys like Jordan Matthews, Ricky Gibson, guys that have earned their spot and earned playing time on the field as true freshmen, having games like Austin Peay and Virginia before they get into conference play, I think that's going to tell wonders about what they are and their potential as Vols.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people are excited about guys like Jordan Mapp, Ricky Gibson, to be able to, put more of that boost, towards secondary. But like, I think, a lot of those guys are returning back as well, like Wesley Walker and even Kamal Haddon. I've heard some good things about him towards, spring practice. And, we'll learn obviously a little bit more about them going next week with fall camp coming up. But I think you're going to see a lot of strides. And I think a lot of people forget too, when it comes to our defense, like, we're all, I think we all remember like the performance against, South Carolina, allowing 63 points and, allowing, 33 to Florida and, 49 to Alabama as well. But like this defense the defense improved a lot compared to year one. So I think you're going to see a lot of improvement with that, with the secondary, we'll a lot of questions with the defensive line, but there's talent there. But, regardless, 38 days, going to beat the hell out of Virginia. We're going to beat the shit out of Austin Peay. I will be there for that one, of course. And, national television focus, both on the Virginia game and for the Florida night game as well. I mean, it's great recognition for the program and, and publicity especially.
Oh, yeah. And, obviously a lot of games circled on the schedule. Got my tickets locked in for the fucking Beamer Revenge Bowl in Neyland.
Oh, yeah.
Cannot wait for that. September 30th, Tennessee taking on USC Junior. You got to be there. It's fucking your birthright after what happened last year. Definitely the one I have circled on my list this year. Want to give a big middle finger to whatever is in the air right now because if you can't tell, I'm losing my fucking voice. But overall, man, as we count down these days, can't wait to be back with the Vols ATB crew. Cannot wait to be making more funny memories with my boy Drew because God help us what happened last year. Switching on before we end the show, I guess we covered the other athletics. Tennessee basketball getting their feet wet. A lot of guys, a lot of praise for the young guys there. The baseball team, looking for a shortstop now. We can cover this. Maui Ahuna officially signed with the Giants today. Tennessee had some 1% glimpse of hope that maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't sign. But it also goes to show what kind of programs you're building in your other sports when guys are being able to go pro instead of returning for an extra year. Super excited for him.
Yeah.
All eyes turn to what Tennessee does that. I'm sure they get involved with the portal where Tony V has been completely hot.
Yeah, and I'm sure they'll get more, definitely get more involvement in the portal and trying to fill that void and that gap that, Ahuna, had last year. And I think a lot of people forget, Ahuna, he came off of a rocky start last season, starting off as a suspension from the NCAA, which was just ridiculous in the first place. And I think we all know the reason why he had that suspension, first of all.
Yeah.
But even despite, struggling, at bat in conference play, the start of conference play, he still wound up batting over 300. He was one of our best defensive players, all of last season, made very, very few limited mistakes for the most part. And, I mean, it's going to be a tough loss, dude. I just think one of the things that key takeaway from him is, he was able to get that negotiated price with the Giants. I think he wound up getting it was over $550,000 in the span of 4 years. So pretty good, decent chunk of change for a mid-round, draft pick. But, I also, when you look at this, lineup and see what Tennessee has coming in, getting the kid, from Clemson, coming in as well, a lot of key guys returning. Like, he was realistically probably going to be in that 5th or 6th position in the batting lineup. And I think he was just one of those dudes where, he did not want that. He wanted to be at the top of the lineup, and, you could argue as to why he shouldn't be. But at the end of the day, man, if you're able to get that negotiated price to play in the pros, and you got to take it, unless, NIL can cover that, of course. But NIL, at least for,
is just
at least for baseball, at least for college baseball, it's not just yet. It's not going to be able to cover that same price, as an MLB
maybe 50, but
rookie salary. So tough loss.
When I look at baseball, man, I think the biggest home run was only losing one of your high school commits in Carson Rucker to the MLB draft to the Tigers like you did. This class being the number one class, obviously the work that Tony Vitello has put in the transfer portal. I'm sure there's a lot of guys that we don't even know that are on the roster now or incoming in this 2024 class that could easily step up and have an instant impact. But to get guys like you have in Cannon Peebles and, going into Clemson and getting their, catcher, Billy Amick, I just think it's, can't be stressed enough what's going on in the basketball and baseball programs. And the trajectory is just insane. Absolutely ridiculous that we can talk about all 3 male athletic programs and say they're going to probably finish top 5.
No, I mean, absolutely. And I mean, anytime that your program is able to produce consistently now 6, 7, 8 guys to get drafted in the MLB draft, I mean, that speaks volumes for your program. I mean, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the last 2 drafts combined, Tennessee's had the most players drafted, for college baseball. And that just speaks volumes for Tony Vitello, especially given the fact that he's at a disadvantage with, a lot of the facilities that we have for the baseball program, too, which, of course, will begin a very nice upgrade here in the next couple of years.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I think it just speaks, it just shows how elite of a recruiter, how elite of a coach, and how highly thought of that Tony Vitello and the staff is thought of with a lot of MLB organizations. But I wanted to follow up with the little basketball transfer to that real quick. So we got a couple news real quick. Basketball teams this week, do a couple preseason games, playing against a couple professional teams. It'd be a good little warm-ups for them. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, even our own Vols ATB Low will be at one of those games. Not too entirely sure, but that is what the rumor is around town. But, no, it'll be good. It'll be good practice for them. And, dude, I mean, a lot of praise has been from Rick Barnes about DJ Jefferson and Cameron Carr and, Freddie Buckets, too. And I think, a lot of people forgot about DJ Jefferson because, he was one of those, few 3 or 4 dudes that were in that red shirt last season, didn't get any playing time. But when you look at his, he's 6'5", 6'6". He's a guy that can play the 4 position. He can play 2. He can shoot. He's aggressive defensively.
A highlight reel dunker.
Oh, my God, dude. It's crazy I would say this, and I never thought I would even say this, but I'm actually just as excited, if not even more excited about this upcoming basketball season than I am with football, because you got 10, 11 guys that could be able to play in conference play against top, 30, 40 opponents, and we have depth, in all positions all around, as opposed to last season. JP Estrella, Jonas Adu, Awaka, those guys are going to be playing 5. Triple J is going to be playing at the 4, probably along with, DJ Jefferson, and then you got Dalton Connect, Cameron Carr, Freddie Buckets, Vescovy. I mean, the talent, and the one guy that we always keep on forgetting, who was the most important player last year, Zakai Ziegler's coming back. He's going to be full 100% by conference play. The talent is off the chain for this basketball team. And, I was looking at Vegas today, plus 2,000 odds, 2,001 odds of them winning the national title. Honestly, I think if there's any team that's going to do it, it's this team, man, as far as the talent-wise go, because there's proven guys on there. You can shake your head. You can call me a winner.
No, I agree with you. It's just I remember us last year,
we knew deep
mid-season.
down that Kamwa and Euros were big question marks. We were hoping that they would take that next step, and obviously they didn't. But with Jonas Adu, he had more production than those 2 guys. If Awaka, he's only going to get better, and he's only 6'9". And you've heard nothing but high praise about JP Estrella, about how he could be a day 1 starter even. So there's a lot of excitement towards this basketball program. And then plus, before we go, of course, did want to mention that we did find out yesterday that we'll open up the Maui Invitational against Syracuse, which, in my opinion, I said on Twitter the other day, I don't think you could have asked for a better starting opening matchup for us outside Chaminade, of course, because Chaminade.
Kansas, yeah, holy shit.
Cool. But Syracuse is a team that only finished 500 in conference play, 17-15 last year, missing a lot of guys, losing a lot of talent. And you're talking about potentially we get either Gonzaga or Purdue in that next matchup, which is going to be exciting as hell to watch. So I'm fired up about that tournament. I'm fired up about basketball, man. We've been praying for days like this, my man. Been praying for days that we would be good or even half-ass decent in all sports. And you're talking about college baseball, college basketball, and college football. Tennessee's all within top 10, top 5 programs right now. It's phenomenal.
Oh, yeah, man, for sure. Cannot wait for basketball season. Like you said, that roster on paper, like we said last year, I think it has a different meaning this year from what happened, how we ended against FAU, from that tone to now. Just absolutely stacked. Cannot wait to see guys like Jordan Gainey, Dalton Connect, and others get their feet wet in the chemistry that they can build. I think that's been the biggest thing with our past, portal action. A lot of guys we brought in, you kind of knew from the start that the chemistry kind of wasn't there. You saw it on the court. It was just really weird. I think a lot of these guys and the skill set that they bring in, what we had last year, what we're bringing into this year, is going to be able to fit really well, mold really well for the basketball program. Yeah. And obviously kicking off against Virginia in 38 days. Cannot get excited more than enough, man. It's just a great time, 38 days into a college football. Probably even sooner if you follow the week 0 match and everything else.
Oh yeah. Of course.
Jam-packed episode, joined by our boy Matt Ray. Be able to sure to go check him out over at the VQ VolQuest, or follow Matt_Ray_ on the Twitter and the social media handles. Drew, your biggest takeaway before we end off the show, and any final comments?
I think my biggest takeaway was, Matt's excited about, this wide receiver unit that we have this season. I think a lot of it would still be at the same level as production as far as last year goes. But, him emphasizing on Dante Thornton having a wider skill set and, even larger potential than even guys like Jalen Hyatt or Tillman. I know he didn't say that exactly, but that's what he more or less, mentioned on it. That's got me fired up, dude. I mean, and when you really think about it, too, I mean, you got 4, 5, 6 wideouts in that position alone, that could be able to be huge threats, And so I just can't help but get fired up about this football season. I think the potential is, through the roof with the squad. We'll talk about in a couple of weeks when we do our full season prediction on what's our biggest games of the year. You obviously can think of, Florida, South Carolina, and obviously Alabama and Georgia, of course. But I think this team has the potential to do some very, very special things. And, there's no endless possibilities when it comes to this team. This team could go 8-4. This team could go 12-0. They really can. So it's hard to say, but 38 days can't come here soon enough. And man, what a better way to start off the season than, playing on national television on ABC and beating the brakes off of come that first weekend of September.
So what's crazy is that before we end the show, I guess we'll end off with this little nug. Matt Ray, who was on the show, just retweeted Chad Simmons' recent update heading into the recruiting weekend, talking about, 5-star / 4-star defensive lineman Kamarion Franklin. Ole Miss trying to stay in it, but heading into this weekend, the most buzz was around Tennessee. Franklin would take a midday to visit to Auburn, then spending the weekend back in Miami, but will ultimately try to find a way to get back into Tennessee. The only school he has visited to date is Tennessee, and he's only visited there with his grandma. So him having that kind of effect, she's going to get to go to Miami, but it sounds like the Tennessee-Miami top 2 rumors might very well be true. Do they kind of spin back? Do they try to get Kamarion Franklin back in for a later visit like they hope? I think if they do, that'll give you all the indicators that the Vols are in really, really good shape there. We hope to be back in full strength with the ATB crew here in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Hopefully our boy Alex getting his license taken care of. Hopefully get our host Low back in full strength, and then our boy King Rob on the daddy duties, getting his life back on track after the whole military stuff he was doing. So leading up to football, 38 days for, until football time in Tennessee. But I think the ATB podcast here soon, back in the full strength, and cannot wait to have our friends back, Drew. What, did I throw a shot at Rob there?
No. There was some random ass static noise that happened. We were talking. It was very weird. I don't think you heard it, but it might have
Nothing new, Bubba. I wish I had a great fucking setup, but I got this fucking microphone. I got no voice, and the Vols ATB balling on the budget.
No shot towards Rob, and thoughts and prayers, of course, for Alex. Killing his exam and all that good stuff, and of course, Lo being back at full strength here soon. Very jealous of her going to Italy next week. I'm extremely jealous, actually, but.
Jesus Christ, my city is burning down. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Gotta love city life, man. You really do. But, no, hopefully get a full crew here next 2 or 3 weeks, and we'll get our finally, my favorite episode of the year, our full-blown season prediction, what we think about, where this team's going to go. And who knows, we'll even get a few more extra special guests here along the way. But, Brando, it's been an absolute pleasure. Larry says he blames
Larry, get off that ledge, get off the bridge, don't jump. Josh Heupel and co. are they're fine. We are fine.
Larry, we are golden, dude.
Listen, I will say that Larry is not 100% wrong, but I'm not blaming our NIL collective for any misses just because the fact that when people hear about Tennessee, they think of the Vol Club, they think of Spire Sports, and they know they have to do and go over the top to land recruits. I think Kai Bates' best relationships were at Tennessee. Tennessee builds the best relationships. Props to our staff for doing it, but it is a new day and age where fucking money talks. So it is what it is. That does not, come off the fact that Tennessee's coming off a 10-2 season, going for another 10-2 season, and very much will have a top 10 class in the recruiting cycle. A lot more positivity to look to negativity, and I guess that points to all the BBS out there. Don't jump off the ledge because in 38 days we're back rocking and singing Rocky Top.
And I mean, I'll leave this. Larry, I'm not hearing this negative talk here for a second from you. We might have missed. Maybe NIL did it, maybe not. I believe with my sources along with Brando, it wasn't the case. But what we can say is that for NIL, Mike Matthews is one of the reasons why he's here. So it's just the name of the game. It's the day of age college football. You just got to play along with it. But you're not going to get every recruit that you're going to get. You're not. You're just not going to get every single one that you
go out there. You land Amari Jefferson. You get in with Bennett Warren. Hopefully, you're battling Michigan there. And then the news now dropping from Camarion Franklin, you get a 5-star defensive lineman. And I think the positions and needs that everyone's kind of panicking about on both sides of the trenches will be figured out. And Tennessee's just adding to the roster, not to mention that what they can do from December and all the way to May as they lock down the transfer portal era as well. A lot. It's easy to look at it now, but I think the future is bright, as we say every week, and cannot wait until we're back here at full strength.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Nothing to worry about. No need to panic. We are in a great position. And, hopefully we can start off August on a high note as well coming into next week.
Yep, I guess that's going to do it. We will be back here next Wednesday at the same time, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, bringing you all the Tennessee updates, news, breaking news. Might have a new commit, might not. You never know in this day and age of recruiting. You really can't have a week without some kind of breaking news from some kind of Tennessee athletic program. Drew, my boy, it's a pleasure having you here every week, dealing with me. Everyone else, our fans, listeners, appreciate y'all for tuning in. And until next Wednesday, good night and go Vols, baby.
Go Vols.